start shooting. So obviously at that point in time, this now mattered a lot more than the past now or the future now. So
it matters because of what's happening at it, not because it's now. So I'm not denying that sometimes have special features, you know, because of what's happening at them that might make you want to do something. What I'm saying is that it's no different than space. So like some places of space might be, you know, 1,000 degrees, and other places more cooler. Well, if you're in the one that's 1,000 degrees, you're going to want to get out of there and move to another space. So there is, in that sense, something about the place you are here that's bad and it makes you want to do something. But it's not bad because it's here. It's bad. There's nothing about it being here that gives it any special features, the qualities and so on, the properties of it. So, yeah, so what I meant by there's nothing special about now is there's nothing special about now just in virtue of it being now, as opposed to there's a plane coming. Thank you.
Just a fun thought then. If we were to inflict pain on oneself, would that be masochism or sadism?
That's a good thought. If you're doing it in a continuous way, then it's both. Because you're doing something to your future self. Now, of course, we don't use sadism in this way, but if you were going to apply it literally as like it's another person, right? And sadism is doing something to torture your future self, then it would be could be a kind of sadism. But also, if it's continuous, then you know I'm doing it masochism because I'm pushing the needle into my hand as I'm feeling the pain also. So the one temporal part is both inflicting and feeling the pain, so we can masochism as well. But if you just do something now, like push a button that will give you great pain a second later, then it's not masochism really at all. It's just you're doing something now to make somebody else suffer. Now, I'm not saying that we should change our ways of thinking about sadism, masochism, or respond to this, because, as I said before, I think you're so connected to that other self-abuse, it's only a second away, that it's not really going to change about.
Then, in a very much cruder form of the question, would masturbation be like, is it incestual?
Well, we're true.
Yes, but it's a thought.
Yeah, well, I'll pass on that question. But yeah, the same issues with the thought.
So would this view incline one more towards forgiveness? Like, would it follow that if anytime someone truly repents for a past action, they shouldn't be punished? Because in a sense, they're not the same person who committed the act.
Absolutely. It has real effects on punishment. Because how can you really justify putting someone in jail who is so, you know, and making them, so somebody commits some crime and they're given a life sentence, and they do have a total religious experience in jail. They totally changed. They totally repented. They're not the sort of person that would ever do that now, and so on. And how do you justify keeping them in jail for the rest of their life? I mean, think of it. You're really keeping in jail somebody who's so different from the person who committed the crime that, you know, the usual way of thinking of it, when you did it, you have to suffer, just doesn't really apply. So yeah, I think it really applies to punishment. Now, of course, there are other reasons you might argue for punishment of that sort, like the deterrent and so on. But I don't think the usual justification of, you know, well, you did it. It was you who did that crime, therefore you should pay, doesn't really apply in the case where the person is totally changed.
I guess going off what she said is, are you sure there isn't a way in which the connection that one individual space-time part of me, the relationship it has to another one of me, that's qualitatively different from, or quantitatively, I don't know, different from the relationship that mean, but not even just that it's a lot stronger, but that there's something fundamentally different in that, as you said, I can actually share experiences directly.
Well, let's think about what it means to say share experiences. So on this view, what's really happening is the later self has experiences, the early self has experiences, and those are different experiences that are connected in certain ways by causal relationships that give you memory and so on. But it isn't literally sharing experiences. And so I think that if you describe it as sharing experiences, then you're going back to sort of some kind of literal way in which it's the same person doing both. And that's what we're trying to get away with. There's no one thing that's literally experiencing both ways. So in one sense I want to agree, in one sense I don't. I mean, the relationship you have to your future self is different than you are. So I don't want to I don't think that they just all meld together and now you shouldn't have any different attitudes with them. That's just wrong. But when people try to get at the ways in which it's different, and fundamentally different than relation to other people, I think you have to be careful not to import this idea that I think isn't really coherent, that somehow there's one thing that's literally present at all the different times in your life. Now, I'm not saying that that's, something which is a contradiction. I mean, you can have a kind of view where here's space-time, and here are the material parts that are, like I said, have involved the material rather than the parts. But you are somehow outside of space-time. And you are one thing that literally occupies these different parts in some sense. So there is a way to make sense of it. Say that? So it would almost inevitably be a kind of use. I mean, it doesn't have to be directly mind versus body. I don't know, soul. I don't know what the thing is supposed to be outside. I mean, that's one of the biggest, there are a lot of problems with this view. One, what reason do we have to believe in this? Because it seems we can account for all of our actual evidence just by looking at what's going on here. So this doesn't really seem to add anything. So unless you're moving for religious reasons to believe in something like this. Now, with respect to dualism and mind-body, I guess that would be very much the issue. To what extent we can really account for mind and consciousness just out of the stuff that's here. So we wouldn't really need the positive. But I think, if you were a dualist, I think the way I would tend to be a dualist would be to say at every stage you divide into a mind and a body. So temporal parts themselves divide into a material part, which is the body, and a mental part, which is the mind. But you have different mental parts as you go along. So you don't get one thing that sort of occupies or is present everywhere. You actually, that sort of dualism, you have the same sequence of temporal parts, but now mind parts. So I certainly don't want to say it's totally incoherent to say that there's sort of one thing which is wholly present at all the different points on this timeline. But I can't think of any good reason to believe it.
So I guess I'm thinking about the field of philosophy of literature. So when you think about time, how does this affect sort of our idea of time in a novel? Because it's very set down in paper. It's very two-dimensional. Because when you're reading a novel and you're looking at it philosophically, you're growing with the character along with themselves. But it's hard to sort of apply four-dimensionalism to a novel. And imagining it as a world within a world kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it's hard. I mean, I think when we think of worlds of fiction, so we're not talking about anything that's part of our space-time. We're talking about some alternate reality. That's what the fiction is describing. And I think that the natural thing is, when we are talking about alternate realities, worlds of fiction, the things that aren't explicitly said to be different than they are in actuality, we just import things from our actual physical world to fiction. Like if the fiction doesn't say that, anything about Mars, you're just going to assume Mars is still there. You're not going to assume it's gone. Well, similarly with the metaphysical stuff, if I think the best way to think about persisting objects is that they're composed of temporal parts in reality, then that would be the right way for me to understand people in fiction as well. They're all, even though they don't say it. So I guess the answer is, for at least most fictions, it wouldn't really.
Anything else?
Yeah, so I've heard from like some religious ideas of the afterlife. There's an idea of that instead of like strictly speaking that you'd be living forever, it's more like you're escaping from time, so you're no longer like experiencing time. Is that metaphysically possible in this viewpoint, or that could it still be like the same temporal object that is now somehow outside of time, or no?
I can't think of any easy way to incorporate that view into the four-dimensionalism. So the four-dimensionalism is the view that persisting object, which includes people, can be represented as sort of a space-time where the sum of parts. And what you're talking about is that then after death, you're no longer located in the space-time at all. I don't know where you are, but you're not there anymore. So you're not, your life can't be represented anymore by just the worm. So you've got some other, and I can't, and if you're not in time at all, then I can't even think of them as you've got stages or temporal parts in some other space-time or something. That would be one way of thinking of it. But think about it, that view is pretty incoherent. I mean, I hope that if there is an afterlife, I hope that I'm able to think importantly as a creature in that afterlife. Well, thinking requires time. You can't think without there being time. So any afterlife that had no time dimension would seem to me, I couldn't even make sense of it. Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that four-dimensionalism is naturally presented in a way that looks like you're not going to have legitimate alternatives to the way things go. So the future is already laid out. We don't know when it is, but in some sense, there's one space-time, and what happens later in the future is already there. But there are two things to say about that. I mean, one is that really doesn't commit you to determinism if you're what's called a compatibilist about these things. So I think that doesn't mean that it isn't correct to say without free will. So even in this framework, I think a so-called compatibilist can make sense of what it means to have free will. But the other thing to say is you really could expand this and have a more complicated structure that allows for branching. And so you could even build into the 4D model something that allows you to literally have not one unique feature, but many different features. So I don't think you're committed to determinism in either a strong or weak way, even though it looks like it's that.
I was reading, Ted Sider presented like the paradox of like the ship of Theseus, and I was just like wondering like what like the replacement planks in it, and I was just wondering like which ship would you consider to be the ship of Theseus?
Yeah. Well, the temporal parts view that I've been presenting, four-dimensionalism, really helps you to make sense of puzzles like the ship of Theseus. It doesn't necessarily give you an answer, but it allows you to say maybe there is no answer. It could be indeterminate. So, I don't know if you have a minute.